A strong composition is pleasing to the eye, easy to understand, and has a sense of effortlessness to it. We know it's not effortless, it takes a lot of thought to make a pleasing composition, but how do you make it feel effortless and natural? That's what we're going to talk about today. Your composition at its core is made up of carefully arranged shapes and lines. Shooting cleaner compositions comes down to how you arrange those shapes and lines within the frame. It all starts with balance. A balanced image is the foundation to an effortless looking composition. Imagine your photo is like one of those balancing scales. You put a rock on one side and a feather on the other side. Which side goes down? The side with the heavier object. In photography, visual weight is how heavy something looks compared to the things around it in the frame. Some things look heavier to your eyes, like bright, bold colors, big shapes, faces and heads, dark shadows, or objects near the edges or corners of the frame. When you take a photo, your eyes feel the weight of different things in it. If one area of the image feels too heavy, it can look unbalanced, like a lopsided scale. To balance an image out, we need to give the frame enough of an opposite element or something with equal visual weight to even things out. But that scale works vertically as well. Just as an image can be heavy on the right or left sides, it can be heavy at the top or bottom. Starting simple, in this frame, I wanted to shoot straight into the sun at golden hour while focused on these surfers at the edge of the water. Because we perceive shadows as heavier, I let roughly the bottom third of the image be shadow, while the top 2/3 is the sky. The sun is perfectly centered in the frame, and the bright body of water being larger on the left side of the frame here balances out the dark trees on the right side of the frame. And I want to touch on a point here that I'm going to continue to point out in a lot of the images going forward. Notice the space here between the top of the surfer's head and the line of the water. This space here is breathing room. That breathing room is essential to creating pleasing compositions. When shapes get too close together and don't have enough room to breathe, it can make the image feel crowded, uneasy, and slightly off. These are called tension points. These tension points aren't always bad though. Sometimes they can add energy or even a sense of uneasiness if that's what you're going for. But if you want a calmer feel, lean toward that breathing room. Moving on, in this image we have our subject, this lady in a dark coat, walking down the street on this fall day. If we look at the grids for how this image is laid out, we can see that this red tree at the top I wanted to include as a contrast to the blue sky, and to tie in this red, yellow, blue color palette is roughly filling the top 1/3 of the frame. To balance that out, we have the road up to the wall at the back, filling the bottom third of the frame. Any more road would feel bottom heavy, and any more tree would feel top heavy and pull attention from the subject. And the subject, a dark figure on the light background, which has a lot of weight, because remember, high contrast also creates visual weight, is placed roughly on the left-hand third. And while we're talking about the subject, notice again the breathing room here between the subject and the light post. This helps my subject stand out fully and adds to the free-flowing feel of the image as opposed to a tension point. And the final compositional element in this image, this yellow tree on the left side. This is balanced out by the dark house on the right side of the frame and its shadow cast into the street. The house is much smaller in the frame than the tree, but because its shadow casts so far into the middle of the road, that visual weight is balanced out. So you can absolutely use light and shadow as compositional elements with weight of their own to help balance out a frame, not just physical things with real life weight. Now I want to take a second before we move on to the next image to talk about another element of polish, and that's the edges of your frame. In the raw file of this image, this house on the right has a hit of bright light on it. Remember that high contrast at the edge of the frame pulls your eye away. So all I've done here is simply cropped in a bit to clean up the edges. Before you finish up an image, take a look at it in full screen with a white border and scan the edges for any distractions. I can do this in Lightroom by hitting F on my keyboard and then right-clicking and changing the background to white, and then hitting Control or Command minus to zoom out a bit. I'll scan the edges of the frame and then crop or retouch if necessary. Okay, let's go for a tighter medium angle composition now. and I've got a close-up of people to cap things off after this. We've got a relatively complex composition here. There's multiple spaces, a pathway, colors, lighting, texture, but actually creating this composition isn't super complicated. This image here can pretty much be divided into quadrants. We have this line from the door frame cutting straight down the middle. Notice the breathing room again with the line in the back. This upper half of the image has a lot of visual elements to it. We have this red lantern, the hits of light on the walls, the pot, the tree, and the curtain. All of this visual information is balanced out by the relative negative space in the bottom half of the frame. This bottom half of the image is quite simple and minimal by comparison to the top half. We have this plain wall, the simple wooden frame, and the walking path, which compared to the busyness in the top half is quite calm. This emptiness, also known as negative space, helps the image breathe, avoid feeling overwhelming, and balances out all the high texture elements in the top half. This bright, vibrant lantern on the right balances out all the darker objects on the left, but it's that negative space in the lower half that balances the image out top to bottom. So you don't always need an object to balance out another object. Minimal shapes, textures, and areas of emptiness or negative space can also balance out a frame. Now let's talk about photographing people up close. The pairing here is close to centered in the frame, with each person on a third, but it's the height of their heads in the frame that's most important. Notice that the man's head is placed on the upper third of the composition. At the beginning of the video, we mentioned that heads are one of the things that have a lot of visual weight. So when I photograph people up close, I like to put their eye line on the upper third and let the body balance out the rest. We can't do anything about her being shorter, but the top of her head still hits that upper third. I've also left less space between her and the edge of the frame because this dark car adds weight to the right side. So I'm using the fact that she's high contrast with her brighter clothing to balance out the opposite side. And to round things out, let's bring our eye up to the umbrellas. Remember earlier we talked about tension points and that they're not always bad because they can add energy to a scene. If we look at the lines of their umbrellas, they're kind of touching but just barely, and they also leave tiny gaps between their heads. In this image it works. One, because it lets more of the light from the background through. If I had the shapes overlap, you'd see less of the city lights. But more importantly, two, because of the context and story of this image. This image is taken in Ginza in Tokyo, a pretty high-end neighborhood with lots of fancy shops, restaurants, and bars. All of this is also reflected in their clothing. The tension points are fine because I want the image to feel energetic because of this context. So I want to strike a balance between this romantic feel and the energy of the city after dark. So to recap, we talked about balance and visual weight. Things like bright bold colors, big shapes, faces and heads, dark shadows, points of high contrast, and objects near the edges or corner of the frame all look and feel heavier in the frame. So we need to balance them out with opposite or contrasting elements on the other side of the frame for an evenly weighted composition. We talked about tension points and breathing room. Giving objects and strong lines in the frame enough room to breathe creates that feeling of polish in an image. But in some cases, tension points can add energy or a sense of uneasiness when used intentionally if that's what you're going for. We talked about the importance of clean edges of the frame, eliminating points of high contrast right at the edges of the shot by reframing or cropping to make sure the viewer's eye isn't being pulled away from the focal point. And we talked about negative space as it relates to balance. How areas of emptiness or simple colors can serve as balancing tools against busier sections of the frame. And that's your essentials for cleaner and effortless feeling compositions. It takes a lot of practice, but I promise it becomes intuitive. There's a lot of content we talked about in this video, so save it for later or watch it again if you need another listen to really grasp everything. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.